Welcome back to the podcast. We're talking about trauma bonding today. What is it, and how can you actually be productive and work through what trauma bonding is? Trigger warning for everything I ever say, but I'm going to be talking about a concept that a lot of people get triggered by, and I have quite a different view on it. So trigger warning, but let's rock and roll straight into it. So firstly, what is trauma bonding? I just had a quick Google search just to see what the technical definition is out there. This is one that I found. So trauma bonding is a psychological response to abuse. The person experiencing abuse may develop sympathy for the abusive person, which becomes reinforced by cycles of abuse followed by remorse. So it's like a shitty cycle where they feed into each other. So the things I want to highlight is the abuse part and then the sympathy for abuse. Those are known as coping strategies. So I'm actually going to dial things back and I'm going to tie into how I believe trauma bonding plays out and what you can do about it. So please understand this. Every single relationship you ever get into has an element of trauma bonding to it. What do I mean by that? Every relationship that you ever get into is a mirror to you. They mirror your limiting beliefs and your trauma. You attract people who mirror you. You don't see things the way they are. You see things the way you are. You attract your unhealed trauma and limiting beliefs into your relationships. So I'm going to give you a quick definition of what trauma is and where the coping strategies come from. And this will understand why trauma bonding, you can actually do something about it. So this is my definition of trauma. This is from my book launch, by the way. I've written a book. Go grab a copy. I'll talk about that later. Trauma is a moment in time when something was too much or not enough. And it will be a specific word. It is a character trait, an action, an inaction, or a behavior. It could be something like this: rejection, criticism, embarrassment, abuse, overwhelm, invalidation, lying. That's too much. Or it could be not enough: love, safety, validation, presence, being heard, being held, being supported. Now, pay attention. This is where the trauma bond comes into it. Every trauma you have, you will create a coping strategy. This is where the trauma bond plays out. And the coping strategy protects and hides the trauma. These are known as traumatic reactions or trauma responses, coping mechanisms, and shadows. This is what it can look like. It could look like dissociation, procrastination, you get a knot in your stomach, you shame yourself, you avoid or shut off, you develop eating disorders, anxiety, people pleasing. This is a big one for trauma bonders. Depression, needing to be better than everyone, excessive working, drug or alcohol abuse, hatred of men or women, and many, 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 many more. These are the coping strategies. This is directly what ties into the trauma bond. And then take it a little bit further. These coping strategies become the silent puppet masters that sabotage your life. And for every trauma you have, you will be triggered when something reminds you of the trauma. This activates the coping strategy. Nothing triggers you, it reveals what's inside of you. So let's dial this back. So for me, trauma bonding, every single relationship you ever get into is a trauma bond at some level because you attract people based on your limiting beliefs and your trauma. You will attract people and circumstances to reveal where you have not healed. Because let's run through those three things. Trauma, the moment in time when something was too much or not enough. Coping strategies. This is what happens, or this is what you do to avoid or protect yourself from the trauma. A trigger is what reminds you of the trauma and it activates the coping strategy. Now, the reason I say every relationship is a trauma bond at some level, show me a single relationship where you don't get triggered. I'm yet to see one. I'm in one right now. I've been married to my wife for almost a year now. We've been together for about 5 years, coming up to 5 years. And we trigger each other because, and remember, a trigger reveals a trauma. And it activates the coping strategy. And then, so you're triggering each other's trauma. And then your coping strategy is what you project or you hide from, you shut off, whatever the strategy is. And then that will then often trigger your partner. And then their coping strategy gets activated. And then you, quote, trauma bond with each other. People pleasers generally attract the narcissists. Narcissists generally attract the people pleasers. So your strategies and your triggers and your traumas are mirroring each other. And they're not fighting, but they're dancing with each other. They're bonding with each other. So all a trauma bond is, in my world, is a coping strategy. Is each other's coping strategies being triggered and feeding into each other. So that's it. That's what a trauma bond is. Now, what do you do about it? I think that's the powerful thing. I find I've been doing a lot of, I do a lot of deep work and learning and growth and helping others and coaching others. And something I find is people like sort of put out like things like trauma bonding, attachment styles and stuff like that. But they don't give you like, well, what do you do about it? How do you move forward? How do you actually like progress? And that's something I'm very passionate about, giving like steps to move forward. So the thing is, so let's go through this again. Trauma, coping strategies, triggers. Your coping strategies, when triggered, and your partner's coping strategies when triggered is what creates, quote, the trauma bond. Guess what? You can heal trauma. Any trauma can be healed. I'm yet to find a single human who can't heal through trauma as long as they're willing to do the work and they have the right coach or therapist or counselor who has the right tools and modalities to do the work. If you have those, you can heal. And then when you heal the trauma, guess what? The coping strategy and the triggers go away. So what if when you get triggered and it activates your coping strategy, and maybe then your partner does the same, what if after you guys get triggered, you regulate your emotions, you love each other, you get through the storm, you then go drop in and say, okay, what actually triggered me and activated my coping strategy? It will be a specific word. It will be a action, an inaction, a character trait, or a behavior. Did they judge you? Did they criticize you? Did they reject you? Did they abuse you? Did they lie to you? Did they control you? What's the thing that they did that triggered you? And then go heal whatever that trauma or wound is. And then once it's healed, you won't get triggered anymore from that particular wound. Then the next one will show up. And every time you heal, you become more authentic, you become less triggered, you become more secure, and your trauma bonding gets less intense. You'll still have a level of it because there's always more things to heal. I've never met a single human who doesn't still have triggers. So therefore, there's still more traumas and wounds to work on. I still have mine to work on. I've worked through a ton of my stuff, but I still have more to work on. Because once you heal through whatever wound has been revealed, nothing triggers you. It reveals what's inside of you. Guess what? The next one shows up. And then you heal through that. And then the next one shows up. It's the cycle of healing. I have this in my book. There's a trigger. So when you get triggered, that's the first point. The next point is you become aware that you're triggered. You don't go unconscious and blame. Next step is you find whatever the trauma was that was revealed in you. The last step is you heal through it. Then you go back to the start. You get triggered again. And it's just a big cycle. And that's the healing process that every single human being who's conscious and actually healing and working on themselves will go through. And your relationships magnify that. Your intimate relationships are the magnifying glass to your unhealed trauma. So if you want to, quote, stop trauma bonding, you're never going to. You're always going to be triggered in relationships. But if you want to, I'll just reword that. Trauma bonding is not a bad thing. It's going to happen. It is very normal. Show me a single relationship on the planet where you haven't triggered each other at some point. Because it's normal. It's natural. It's going to happen. It's not, is trauma bonding a bad thing? It happens whether you like it or not. It's what do you do once you get triggered, once the trauma bonding happens, once you guys project onto each other, once you get triggered into your trauma, what do you do afterwards? Do you go unconscious and just blame and project and take no ownership? Or do you say, hey, holy shit, thank you, universe, for me attracting this human into my life to mirror the shit in me I haven't healed through yet. So I get to go heal and integrate and love that part of who I am. So I get less triggered, I'm more authentic, I'm more expressed, I access more of my full potential as who I am. Thank you. Or do you say fuck you and just blame your partner? Because I talk about the 3 stages of relationships. One's the honeymoon stage. That's where it's all sunshine, rainbows, and electricity and great sex and all that stuff. But you're only showing some parts of yourself. You're showing your personas. And then the second stage of a relationship is the triggered stage. This is essentially where we get up to here, where you start to see the other parts of your partner that they were hiding, and they start to see the other parts of you that you are hiding, and you trigger each other. Great. Those triggers reveal the wounds you get to heal through, so you can move to stage 3, which is the conscious growth stage, where you're aware that you both have stuff to work through, that you're both going to trigger and mirror each other, so you guys get to become aware of where your triggers are, so you get to heal through them together, and you get to heal more. One of the biggest purposes of an intimate relationship is to help you heal if you're conscious. If you go unconscious, then that's cool as well, no judgment, but it's not how I want to live. I hope that made sense. So I hope this added value to you. Trauma bonding is not a bad thing. It's just part of a relationship where you trigger each other's unhealed stuff. What do you do afterwards? Do you take the ownership and the gift of awareness to actually heal through what they revealed in you? Or do you blame? Do you go unconscious? Do you project? That's the question for you to understand. I hope you got value from this. I hope you really enjoyed it. If you'd like to work with me, a couple of ways you can work with me. I have a book that I've released on Amazon, #1 best-selling author, which is really cool. So go grab a copy of that. It's literally $2 for the digital copy or like $15 for the hard copy. You can join my conscious community if you want to work with me there. Go binge on my content. I got heaps of podcasts, heaps of work for you. And if you got value from this podcast, please share with a friend. Like, I'm here to help the world. I want to change the world. So this is just one way that I do that. So I love you. Hopefully I connect with you soon. Share this with a friend, and I'll see you on the next podcast. See ya.